Hello and welcome back to Project Pro. Last lecture we have seen all about data orchestration and control flow in Azure Data Factory, as well as implementing the conditional and loop activities in ADF. And also we have seen managing the dependencies and scheduling using the triggers in Azure Data Factory. So this lecture is all about integrating our data with different Azure services. So here we have already seen how we can integrate Azure Storage with the Azure Data Factory in the previous lectures. But now we are going to connect our Azure SQL Database to Azure Data Factory, as well as we can utilize Azure Databricks for data integration, as well as we can see how we can integrate Azure Synapse Analytics with ADF. So without wasting any time, let's get into it. Okay, so in the previous lectures, we have seen how we can copy population data and ingest it into the Azure Data Lake Storage. So our population file was present in the Azure Blob Storage, and we have used the ADF pipeline for copying that to our Data Lake Gen 2 storage. Our next step would be we can transform that data present in the Data Lake Gen 2 storage using the Databricks. So to achieve that, what we are going to do is we are going to first create the Databricks service so that we can able to create the clusters and do all this stuff. So the next thing would be we will go ahead and create our Databricks cluster and mount the storage accounts, and we can create a pipeline for transforming the data. So this population data I have already give it to you in the description below. So if you are following along with me, that data is already present in our Azure Data Lake Storage. So in order to start, first we can create a Databricks service. So let's start on that. Okay, so first we need to set up our environment. So for setting up the Databricks environment, the first thing we need to do is creating a Databricks service. So let's go over to your Azure portal and start creating our Databricks resources. So as we are in the Microsoft Azure portal, here we can see all our recent resources which we have created. So we'll just create a resource here. And now we can directly search for Databricks. Okay, so in the marketplace, we got the Azure Databricks service. Okay, so you can just click on the Azure Databricks and you can click on create. Okay, so here we need to give the basic project details. So the first thing would be the subscription. So since I have the free trial subscription, I can give that, or if you have like pay as you go, you can select that as well. And in the resource group, we already have it created for our COVID reporting project. So we'll just go ahead and give like COVID_reporting RG. And in the workspace name, you need to provide a workspace name here. So I'll just give it like COVID reporting Databricks, because that makes sense. The region would be like Central India, which is like the closest region to me right now, but you can select whatever region which is closer to you. The pricing tier should be like the standard, because that will be enough, because we don't need that much resources for our use case. So I'll just select the standard one, and here the manage resource group name, you can leave it as it is. Okay, so in the networking, you can just give the default ones, as well as in the encryption, and if we go to the tags, that will be like the default settings only. So I'll just hit on review plus create. Okay, so the validation is succeeded. So I'll just click on create now. So it will take some 1 or 2 minutes to create. Okay, so our deployment is successfully completed. So you can just click on go to resource. So let's jump on to the Databricks workspace to get started with creating the clusters as well as notebook and all other stuff. So first I'll do is I'll just click on launch workspace now. So it will just head back to the Databricks portal now. And it is just signing in using the Active Directory single sign-on. So you don't have to put on any credentials here. Yeah, so we are in the portal right now. Okay, so I'll just navigate to this tab where we have all the workspaces. So workspace is where you can manage all your notebooks and whatever the research tasks you have created here. As you can see, I have the username here, and also I can create a notebook as well as the library as well as the MLflow experiment that will belong to this user. And we have like the repository, then we have the data. So in the data, we don't have anything because we haven't uploaded any data into it. And also in compute, we don't have any cluster running. So we can create a cluster here and manage that cluster as well. And also we can configure to tune that cluster as per our requirement. And also we can have the workflows here to orchestrate all our activities or notebooks that we are going to create here. But we are not going to use that because we are going to use the Azure Data Factory to orchestrate all this stuff. So here you can create a job and orchestrate your notebooks without any issues. So that was all about the basic introduction to our Databricks portal. So now we will first create our cluster, where I'll tell you about basic about what is Databricks cluster and how we can create it. Okay, so now we'll discuss about Azure Databricks cluster. So cluster means like a set of computational resources, and it is like a configuration on which we can run different jobs like data engineer workloads, data science, as well as the analytics workloads. So it will include like a ETL pipeline as well as the streaming analytics for a real-time data, also the ad hoc analysis, and also you can do the machine learning operations on that. So we can run these workloads as a set of commands in a notebook, or we can also do that in an automated job. So Azure Databricks have two types of cluster. The first one is a all-purpose cluster and the second one is a job cluster. So you use all-purpose cluster for analyzing the data collaboratively using the interactive notebook, and you can use the job cluster for running the fast and robust automated jobs. So we can create all-purpose cluster using the user interface as well as command line interface or the REST API. And also we can manually terminate as well as restart the all-purpose cluster. And also multiple users can share such clusters to do a collaborative work. So, but in case of the job cluster, the job scheduler will create a job cluster when you run a job on a new job cluster, and it will get terminated when the job is completed, and you cannot restart that job cluster. So in our use case, we are going to utilize both these clusters. So how to do that? Let's jump on to that now. Okay, so in our Databricks portal, the first thing we need to do is we need to create our cluster. So we are going to click on new and create a cluster here. So in cluster we have like different options as we have discussed. So we are going to create an interactive cluster here, so we don't need the multi-node cluster. So we'll click on the single node cluster here, and also this is our user, and in performance we have the runtime version. So I'll select the latest one, which is like a 12.2 LTS. LTS means it provides a long-term support. It is going to configure us a Scala 2.12 version with a Spark 3.3.2. And also in the node type we are going to select the standard ones. So we have different compute cluster which is optimized for a general purpose. Then we have the memory optimized as well as the storage optimized version, and also we have the compute optimized options as well. But for this lecture we are going to stick to the basic one, which is the standard general purpose cluster, which have the 40 GBs of memory and 4 cores, and it is going to give us like 0.75 database units per hour. You can convert this into your own currency, so you can just go over to the Azure Databricks pricing monitor, and here we can select the different pricing options. So we can select a workload here, then we have the tier which is the standard, and the region, and also you can convert your currency from dollars to the rupees in my case, and also the pricing by hour. So you can compare both all purpose as well as job computed as well as the job slide computed. So all these clusters you can compare and select the appropriate one as per your requirement. So again we'll just go to the create cluster here. So the next option will be Databricks cluster will get terminated after the inactivity. Here it is set up to 120 minutes. So since it incurs the cost, if our cluster is inactive for 120 minutes, then it gets terminated. So I'll just go ahead and here set the 20 minutes. So after 20 minutes it gets terminated. And also in the advanced option you can give like the init script if you want during the initial phase, but we don't have anything right now, so we are going to create a single node cluster. So here I'll just rename it to the COVID reporting cluster, and also I'll just click on create cluster now. So it will take some time to deploy the cluster. Okay, so let's get started mounting our data lake storage to our Azure Databricks service. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create a Azure Service Principal, and we need to grant the access for data lake for that Azure Service Principal, so that our data lake resource will have all that access we need to able to mount it to our Azure Databricks services. And also at the last we need to create a mount in Databricks using the Service Principal. So let's jump onto the Azure portal and let's get started. Okay, so in the Azure portal all you have to do is go into the menu, and here in the favorites, the Azure Active Directory will be present by default. But if it is not, you can just search for any resources or services here and go into the Azure Active Directory. So I'll just click on the Azure Active Directory here. And in Active Directory, all you have to do is go below and click on the app registration. So in the app registration, we need to create a new registration here. So just click on that. And here we need to provide the name. So I'll just give it as COVID reporting app here, which is the name. And also I'll just give it as a default for a single tenant. We don't have the redirect URL, which is also an optional. So I'll just create on register, and there you go. This is completed. Okay, so after creating an app registration, we need some information here. So we need the application ID as well as the directory ID here. So I'll just copy it into our notepad. So I'll just copy the application ID first, and after that we need the directory ID here. Okay, so this is done. And okay, so after that we need to click on the certificate and secret, and we need to create a new client secret here. So I'll just create a new client secret. So I'll just give it the description as a secret created, and the expire we can give it as 6 months by default. Okay, so I'll just add it, and here you need to copy this value because once you come into that, after it will be gone. So I'll just copy this value here and I'll add it as a secret over here. Okay, so that is done. So next thing we need to do is we need to grant an access to our data lake account to this service principal that we have just created, and we have all the information ready as well. So all we can do is go into all resources, and here we have our data lake storage account, which is COVID reporting tutorial DL. So I'll just go into that. Okay, so I'll just go into our access control, which is IAM, and now I'll click on add, and I'll add a role assignment, and in here we need to assign it as a storage blob data contributor. So I'll just click on that, click on next, and also I'll keep this assign access to as default, which is user group or service principal, and in members you need to add the member here. So in the add member, you will be having your app, which is like COVID reporting app. So I'll just click on that and select it, and I'll just click on review plus assign. So it is adding the role assignment now, and the role is added successfully. So our data lake storage has granted access to our service principal. Okay, so next step you wanna do is you wanna mount this data lake storage account to our Azure Databricks service. So I'll just go ahead to the Azure Databricks, and in here I'll go to the workspace now. And in workspace you can see all the users here. So but in here in workspace, the down arrow, I can create a folder here. So I'll just create a folder named COVID. Click on create folder, and in COVID I'll create another folder. So I'll create a folder named setup, because we are going to use this folder only for setting up and mounting our Azure Data Lake Storage. So I'll just create folder here. Okay, so in this setup, I want to upload a Python script which will enable us to mount our Data Lake Storage account to your Databricks. So I'll just click on the import here, and in import I can browse to my downloads folder where I have this mount storage.py. Okay, so I'll just click on import now. Okay, so it is successfully imported. So let me walk you through this Python script which we are using for mounting our storage account. Okay, so this is our Python script for mounting the data lake storage Gen 2 containers to our Azure Databricks service. So we are going to mount two containers. The first one is a raw, which we already created, and the second one will be the process. So let me just create this process quickly in our Azure Data Lake Gen 2 account. So I'll just go ahead and I'll go to the storage browser here, and in storage browser we only have one container. So I'll going to create a one process container to store all our output files. So I'll just go to the blob container and I'll add a create container. So the name would be like processed, and there you go. You can just simply create it, and a process container is created. So in here we are going to store all our process data as a CSV files. So I'll just go and jump on to our Python code here. So now we have the two containers, a raw and the process. The raw contains our population data file. So to update this, we need to set up the configurations first. So in the configs, we need to set up an application ID as well as the service credential, which is a secret which we have created for our service principal, as well as the directory ID. So we have all this copied in our notepad. So all you have to do is go into the configs and just first copy the application ID. So I'll just go ahead and copy the application ID first, and in here we have the application ID, so I'll just put it over here. The next thing is the secret, so we also have the secret here, so just copy this part and instead of service credential just paste it over here, and in here you need to paste the directory ID as well. So just copy the directory ID here and just paste it over here. Okay, I think it looks fine, so I'll just execute it. So to execute it you can directly use a shift enter, or else you can use the run cell button over here. So I'll just shift enter here, and here as you can see it is asking to attach a cluster to our notebook, so we haven't done that. So I'll just click on cancel it, and in above as you can see it is showing as connect. So in connect we have our cluster running which we have created previously, so I'll just select on that, and it is now starting it. It will take a couple of minutes maybe. Okay, so as you can see our cluster is up and running and attached to our notebook. So all you have to do is just execute our Python cells. So I'll just click on execute. Okay, so that got succeeded. After that we need to mount our raw container. So all you have to do is we need to update the storage account name before executing this command. So in here we need to update our storage account name. So as you can see our storage account name is COVID reporting tutorial DL. So I'll just copy over here and paste it over here. So this will attach our raw container to our Databricks service. So I'll just execute this. Yeah, so that is attached. The next thing is we need to mount our process container here. So same thing we need to do is just copy and paste our storage account name here as well as here. So this will attach our process container to our Databricks service. So once we execute this, yeah, so this is also true. So that is completed. So our main step of mounting our containers to our Databricks service is completed, and now we can go ahead and transform our data to get it into a required format. So let's talk about that now. Okay, so once we have everything ready, we can go ahead and transform our population by age data, which is already present in the Data Lake Storage account. So first let's discuss about our requirements and jump on to our Data Lake Storage and analyze our data. Okay, so currently I am in our Data Lake Storage account, which is COVID reporting tutorial DL, and I am in the raw container. So in the raw container we have our data file present. So I'll just click on that file and click on download to quickly download this file, and as you can see this is our data basically. So we have the population data for all the years from 2008 to 2090 for the Europe countries. So in the first column we have like the age of range of the age like 0 to 14. So for better understanding let me just select any of the country here. So I'll just select the UK now, and also like, okay, so we have data for the population for UK here. But as you can see the main issue here is this date, these two columns are concatenated. The first one is the range of ages as well as the country code. So we need to split these columns. That will be the first requirement. The second requirement is we don't care about this data from 2008 to 2018. We only care about the 2019 data for our use case. So I'll just drop all these columns and we only get this information for 2019. So we should be having ideally three columns. One is for the range of ages, the second one is the country code, as well as the 2019 column. But this is not the ideal way for analyzing the data, or it is not that much readable. So to make it more readable, let's pivot this table. So what we can do is we can have like only one row for a single country. So for UK you will be having only single row, and this age ranges will be the columns, and we have the population for 2019 for all these ranges. So that we are going to do. So that is possible because of our Python notebook that we are going to upload in our Databricks repository. So to sum it up, our end file should look like this. So our raw file have this concatenated column as well as all the data till 2019. So we are going to remove all these fields, and our transform file should look like this. We should have the country code as well as all the columns specific to our age groups. So this will be our transform file. Okay, so once we have all the requirements in place, we can just go ahead to our Databricks portal. So in the Databricks portal, in the workspace, we have our workspace COVID present. So in COVID, we have the setup folder created earlier. So we will create another folder here. So I'll just create a folder here, and the folder name would be like transform. Okay, so in the transform we can put our Python file. So our Python notebook have all the steps required for transforming our data and then write it back to our container. So in the transform we can just import one file here. So in the import we can just quickly get our ipynb file and just import it. Okay, so just click on that. Yeah, so this is how our file looks like. So we are going to transform population by age data by performing the transformations which are given here. So what we are going to do is we are going to split the country code as well as the age group columns into two columns as we have already discussed, and also we are going to exclude all the data which is other than 2019. So we are going to only have the 2019 data, and also we will remove like the non-numeric data from the percentage as well as pivot that data by the age group so that we will be having individual columns for all the age group ranges. So we can just quickly go ahead and just start executing this file and see what it generates. So I'll just quickly execute this file. So as you can see, we got the error like start compute resources. This is because our cluster is not yet assigned to this Python notebook. So I'll just click on cancel and connect to our cluster which we have already have. Okay, so it is in starting phase. So let's wait for a couple of minutes to get it started. Yep, so our cluster is up and running and it is attached to our Python notebook. So I can just start executing this file. So you can do that using the shift enter, or else you can use this run button over here. So I'll just shift enter to file. Yeah, so once you imported all the packages, all you have to do is we have to read the population data and we need to create a temporary view on top of it. So the first thing is you are going to use the spark.read functionality for reading the CSV file from our Data Lake Storage account. So as you can see, I have already given this COVID reporting tutorial DL, which is our resource name, and we have that file present in the raw. So as you can see, if we go over here, we have the raw, and in raw we have our file, and as you can see, process will be our output container. So as you can see, there are no items present over here. Okay, so and we are also giving like the tab delimiter here, and our file has the header, so the header is true. So I am not going to bore you with all this syntax because this lecture is not about Apache Spark and its syntax. It is about the capability of Microsoft Azure Databricks to get integrated with the Azure Data Factory. So as you can see, this is like a simple code which is splitting our concatenated column and converting into the country code as well as the age group. And also we are like creating a temporary view on top of that data frame, and as you can see, if we just execute this step, yeah, so now we only have three columns present in our data frame. The first one will be the country code, second will be the age group, and we have the percentage 2019, which is the population data only from the 2019 year. So as you can see, our first column is split up into two columns and we have the percent sign. So all you have to do is just pivot that data so that we will be having multiple columns for our age group. So the age groups will be neglected now. So we will be only having the country codes as well as the age groups as a columns. And as you can see, that only we are going to do here. So we are going to create a pivot data frame which will select the data, and we are going to use the pivot function for Apache Spark to do so. So once we execute this step, as you can see, we got this output. So if you compared it to the previous data frame, now instead of 3 we have many columns over here. So we have 7 columns in which all the 6 columns belongs to our different age groups, and the first one is a country code. So we have put all the age groups as a columns, and at the last what we are going to do is these columns like this y0_14, these are not readable at all. So we are going to just rename it to the appropriate column names like age_group_ that particular range. That only we are going to do it and order it by using the country code. So once you execute this, okay, so that is executed, And at last, there is very simple. We are going to write the output to our process mount point. So we have already done our mounting to our processed Azure container. So all you can do is you are going to use the write method, and our format will be the CSV file. So for bigger files, it is not recommended to use CSV for, because we are not handling that much bigger data. We are using CSV only. But in real world cases, most probably you will be using the Parquet file, which is very efficient for analysis as well as read and write capability. And as you can see, we got all the options for header, delimiter, as well as this mounting location. So this is going to mount it in our data lake storage account in the process container in the population folder. So it will create a population folder because we don't have it already here. So if we refresh this, we don't have anything in the process container. So if we just go ahead and execute this, and yeah, it is executed. It was quite fast because we are not dealing with the big data here. So quickly we can go ahead, and if we refresh it, and that's it, we have the population folder generated. So in the population we have all our files. So this is our output file. So if I just click on this and download it and open that file, so as you can see, this is our output file, and it has generated all the rows for different countries. So as you can see, we have the country code. So each country code will have a single row present instead of multiple ones. And we have the population for 2019 year. And also we got columns, individual columns for all the age groups present. So this has given like the expected output to us. But this is not the ideal way to execute it, because we need to achieve this using the Azure Data Factory by creating a pipeline. So that approach we are going to discuss now and see how it is executed. Okay, so for creating Azure Data Factory pipeline and execute our already created Databricks notebook, all you have to do is we need to first go to the Azure Data Factory now. So we can just quickly go into our dashboard, and in our dashboard we have the Data Factory resource present. So in Data Factory we can launch the studio to create our pipeline. Yeah, so we are in our Azure Data Factory. So all you have to do is go into the manage, and in manage first we need to create a link service for our Databricks services. So in the link service we can create on new, and in compute we will be having our Azure Databricks option. So I'll just click on continue. So we can give it a name. So I'll just give it as DB for Databricks COVID_reporting. Okay. So we can also give the description, but we can ignore that now. And also this is, we are going to give it as default. So for selecting the Azure subscription, I'll give the free trial subscription, and the Databricks workspace we can have our already created workspace, which is COVID reporting Databricks. Yeah. So we are going to select a cluster, so we can use any of the cluster, but for this new job cluster will be more appropriate. So I'll give that. And in authentication type we need to give the access token, but we also have another options as well. But for us, access token would be appropriate. But for generating access token, you need to go to the Databricks portal now. So just go to the Databricks, and in Databricks we have our user setting. So go to the user setting now, and you have to click over here, which is generate new token. So we have to generate a new token, and we can provide comment. So this is just for a demo purpose. I'll just give demo, and the lifetime of it is 90 days. So after 90 days it will get revoked. So I'll just keep it as default and generate the token now. So make sure to copy this token because we are not going to see it again. So I'll just copy this quickly and then go ahead and paste it over here. So it is generating a cluster version here. So we can select a 10.4 LTS. So LTS means the long-term support, and the cluster node type. So in the cluster node type we can have a general purpose standard cluster, which is like a appropriate for our workload, and the Python version we can select as 3. And here the worker option is fixed, and the worker is 1 only, because we don't need any more workers over here. So we can give all the settings as default. So we can quickly test the connection first, and there you go, the connection is successful, and we can create our link service quickly. Okay, so just the link service is created now. So the only thing you need to do is you need to create a Azure Data Factory pipeline now. So we can go to the author now, and in pipeline we only have one pipeline for copy population data, which we have discussed in earlier lectures. So here we need to create like a pipeline. So just click on pipeline, and the name of the pipeline is like Databricks transform population data. So you just need to go to the Databricks now, and in here we have many options, but for us notebook is the appropriate option. So just drag and drop it over here. Okay, so in the notebook we can give the notebook name as like db population underscore transform, and you can also get description. So and also the timeout here, so it is like a 12 hours, so we can just leave it as default. We also have the retry, which we have discussed in the previous lecture. So I hope you understood how to deal with these configurations. So just we can go ahead and go into the Azure Databricks now and select the link service. So we have already created our link service db underscore covid underscore reporting. So just select that and again test the connection for validation purpose. So it is successful. So we can go ahead to the settings, and here we have our notebook path. So don't worry, we don't need any path to copy and paste here. We can just go ahead into browser and it will do that for us. So we have it in the COVID, and in COVID we have the transform folder created. So in the transform, this is like the data file which we already discussed, and it is, and we also tried to execute that as well. So I'll click on OK now, and there you go. Everything is just set up now. So all you have to do is you have to just debug that pipeline. So but first we'll just validate it. So the validation is succeeded, and let's publish all this detail. So let's publish that. Okay, so the publishing is completed. So we can just again click on debug to test this pipeline, but you can also add the trigger and trigger it now. So I'll gonna do that, but first let's erase that data which is already generated in our container. So I'll just go ahead and into our account. So in storage accounts we have our Data Lake Storage account present, and over here we have our output file. So the output file is present in the blob container, which is process. So in process we have the population folder. So just quickly delete this. So I'll just go ahead and delete this. Okay, so there is no items in here. Okay, so to validate this, just we can trigger this pipeline right away. So I'll just click on trigger now. Okay, so let it run. So we'll view the pipeline run now. So it will take a couple of minutes to complete, and let's see the results now. And as you can see in the logs, our pipeline has been failed. It is failed because it exceeds the approved total region course quota. So for free tier subscription, we are not able to create our job cluster. So to handle this, we have a workaround. We already have a cluster present in our Azure workspace. So in here and go to the compute, we have our cluster up and running. So I want to use that for this purpose as well, because we have already validated it and it was running fine. So but this is not the ideal way, but this is like a workaround. So all we can do is we can if we refresh it, it got failed and we know the message. So we don't have the privileges here, deploy a cluster because of the free tier subscription. So all we can do is go into the manage, go into the link services, and in link services, instead of the new job cluster, we can use the existing interactive cluster. So just click on that, and over here in the existing cluster we have our COVID reporting cluster present. So I'll just click on apply here, and there you go, the changes are made. So we can just go ahead into our pipeline, and again we can just trigger that pipeline now. Okay, so we can view the pipeline run here. So it is in progress right now. So we can see the output here. We are going to refresh it to get the URL generated over here. Yeah, so the URL is generated. So we can just click on that and see the logs over here. So as you can see, we got the output over here. So it is already getting executed. So I think it is should be in the last step. So as you can see, this notebook is succeeded. So if we just go into here and just click on refresh, and there you go, we got the succeeded message over here. So to validate it, again we can go ahead into our data lake account. So in the process we don't have anything, but if we refresh this, we got the population ready. And also we can look at our file. So if we just download this CSV file, and that's it. So we got the expected output as requested. So this was all about how we can integrate our Azure Databricks with Azure Data Factory. So the ideal way is to create a cluster from here itself using this job cluster, but this was a workaround. But I hope you got a clear understanding of how we are approaching this solution. Okay, so our next part is copying the data to the Azure SQL. So since we have all the transform data, which is population by age data, which is present in our Gen2 account in the processed container, all you have to do is we need to copy that data from the Data Lake account to our Azure SQL database. So since we already have a Azure SQL database up and running, just we need to log into our Azure SQL portal and just create a table in which we can copy this data using the Azure Data Factory. So what we're going to do here is, since we already have the data present in our Data Lake Storage Gen2 account, we are going to use the Azure Data Factory capability to copy that data into our Azure SQL database. So without further any ado, let's jump onto the Azure portal and start executing. Okay, so as you can see, this is our population file in which we have all the output present from our previous lecture. So all you have to do is we need to create a dataset on top of this file, which is like a CSV file. Then that dataset could be our source and the sink will be our SQL database. So first thing we need to do is we need to create a table in our Azure SQL database resource. So we are going to just search for the SQL databases over here. So just click on SQL databases and we have our SQL database up and running. So just go into that. So in here we are going to go into the query editor now, and in query editor we are going to log in as an admin. So here we can just give the password and click on OK. So as you can see, this is our query editor. So in the query editor we can jump on and create a schema, and then we can create a table in which we can copy this data. So I already have the script ready. So if we just go ahead and see this, we are going to create a schema COVID reporting, which is, you can say it as a database. So once we created our database, we are going to create a table which is population by age in this database, and we have all the columns present, which is our processed data. So all you can do is we can just copy it and paste it over here. So I am going to give all these resources and codes in description below, so you don't have to go into any hassle, and just run it. And there you go, the query succeeded and our table is already present. So if we go into the table, we have our COVID reporting table present, and here are all the columns. So once we set up all this, all you have to do is go jump on to Azure Data Factory and start creating our pipeline. So once we go into the Azure Data Factory, all you have to do is go into the manage one. And in here, first we need to create a link service for our Azure SQL database. So just click on new, and here we can just search for SQL. So in here we have the Azure SQL database. So just click on continue over here, and the name we can give it as population DB, and also we can give it as default and select the Azure subscription, which is free trial, and the server name. So we have already created a server which is COVID tutorial DB. And also we have the database name as well. So our database name is covid-tutorial-db. And also in the authentication type, we can give as a SQL authentication. So our username and password will be the ADM, and give the password over here. So the password. Okay, so once everything is done, all you have to do is you have to create this link service. And there you go, it is successfully created. So one thing is done, so our sink is ready. So we need to configure our source as well. So to configure our source, all you have to do is just go into the author now, and in dataset we need to create a new dataset. So just click on new dataset. Here we can show it as Gen2 folder Azure. So the Azure Data Lake Storage Gen2, we can continue. Then we are going to create this as a CSV file. So continue on that. So the name of this data set, we can give it as transform population data. So we need to select a link service. So we already have a link service present from our previous lecture, so we can utilize that only. which is like link service COVID reporting underscore gen 2. Okay, so here we need to select the file path for our file. So just browse it and we have it in the processed. So in the process we have the population file present. So we are going to click on OK. Okay, so just the first row will be the header, and also we need to click on OK now, and there you go. Okay, so once everything is look good, you have the transform population data present. So just to validate is we can preview the data also. So as you can see, we got the data as needed. So we have like the country code and all the age groups present. So one thing you need to do is once we just publish this details, so just publishing all the details. Okay, so this is completed. So all you have to do is you need to create a new pipeline over here. So in the pipeline we have two pipelines over here. So we'll create a new pipeline here, and in this pipeline we need to get the copy activity. So all you have to do is just go into the general one and get the copy activity over here. Our activity name would be like copy to SQL. Okay, so all you have to do is you can just also give the timeout as well as the retry and the retry interval. So these configurations you can do according to your use case. So I am not going to touch that and keep it as default. So first thing you need to do is click on the source. So in the source dataset you need to click on to the source dataset which we have just created. So which is like transform population data. So we are going to just keep it everything as default. So in sync, all you have to do is we need to create a sync dataset. So we don't have any dataset, so we need to create it on top of our SQL dataset. So just give it as SQL here, and in SQL we have the Azure SQL Database. So just click on continue, and as you can see we got like the name of that. So the name would be like SQL DB, and the link services would be, we have already created it, which is population underscore DB. And as you can see we can select the table name as well. So we have like the schema which is COVID reporting dot population by age table, and as you can see we can import the schema as well. So in the advanced we can just configure it, and there you go, we can go to the schema and also just make the changes as needed. So I'll just go into the pipeline now, and the pipeline name would be copy population to SQL. So that will be our pipeline name. So once everything looks good, we can just go ahead and just debug this pipeline. But first let's publish all these details. Okay, so it is asking for the wildcard file name is required. So I'll just close this. So once we go into the source, okay, so we have a quick workaround over here. So in the transform population data we haven't given a specific file name. So we already know that our file name is over here, which is like a .csv file, and all these files are just the logs which are generated by this process. So we can click on OK and make these changes. So we can publish all these changes and make these changes. So we can just go ahead to our pipeline now and just validate it, and there you go, the validation is now succeeded. So all you can do is we can just quickly publish all these changes. So we'll publish it, and after that we can do a run on it by using the add trigger, and there you go, the publishing is completed. So we can just click on the add trigger and we can click on trigger now. Okay, so we can go to the view pipeline run, and there you go, the status is in queue right now. And as you can see our pipeline run has been succeeded. So if we just click on preview and refresh it, as you can see we have read the data. So we have read that 48 rows and rows written are also 48. So we have successfully copied the data from our Azure Data Lake Gen 2 account to our Azure SQL Database. So as you can see we got all the parameters here for our pipeline run. So all you can do is to validate this, we can go ahead and click on to our query editor, and here in query editor we can select the data from our table. So we can just select all the data from our tables. So our table name is like COVID reporting dot population by age. So if we run this query, as you can see we got all the data published. So this is how we can integrate our Azure SQL Database to our Azure Data Factory, and also we have copied the data which is like in the transform version from the Data Lake Storage account to our Azure SQL Database. Okay, so this was all about today's lecture. In this lecture, we have gone over the data integration with different Azure services like the SQL Database as well as the Azure Databricks. And we have done all this using our population data, which we are using it from the beginning itself. So I am going to give you all the resources in the description below so that you can not go into any hassle. So if you face any difficulty, just let me know in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. So the next lecture will be releasing on the 10th July and the topic is monitoring and management. This is very important topic when you are going to productionalize your Azure Data Factory resources. So in this lecture, we are going to discuss about monitoring Azure Data Factory pipelines as well as its activities. So we can configure like the logging and alerting mechanism as well as like the event based triggers as well as how to manage like the event based triggers as well as the security and access control in Azure Data Factory. So this is going to be very interesting. So I'll see you in the next lecture.